Hi everyone, it's so nice to be at the 4:30. I haven't been here for a while. As Lou said, I'm usually at the 6:30 in the evening and at Courtfield Gardens in the morning. We are, if you haven't been around for a couple of weeks, we are in a series at the moment called Love Lessons, all about relationships. And we're digging into all of the different aspects of relationships, friendship, dating, and I got marriage, which is amazing. So we're going to be talking tonight about marriage. A few years ago, at my younger brother's wedding, an older guy, a family friend actually, who admittedly had quite a bit to drink by that stage of the evening, came up to me and said, "Haven't you found anyone to marry you yet?" Annoyingly, I only managed something like, no, haven't found the right person yet. And maybe some of you, if you're single, or when you were single, you've had a similar experience to me. But as you can see, not married yet. And remembering that incident this week got me thinking about why that remark is just quite so offensive. And I think it's because it shows really clearly that he had totally misunderstood what marriage is. Thinking that somehow it's about achieving something, being good enough that somebody wants to marry you, attaining some kind of life status or a badge of honor. And I think that is what lies at the core of most people's misconceptions about what marriage is, why we get married, what its purpose is in the Bible. And that has been true a little bit for me at times. I've confused whether I was married or not with who I am as a person. Because marital status can so easily become our entire identity. And it's a temptation that many of us might face, whether we're married or whether we're not. So tonight we're going to take a really good look at marriage, at what the Bible really says about it, because it has a lot to say, from Genesis right through to Revelation. And I realize that that's quite a big task, and almost everybody in this room will be coming from a different place where marriage is concerned. There are probably some of you here tonight who are really happily married, and it's the best thing that you ever did. There are probably some of you who aren't married, and you would love to be, and it might be a real source of pain in your life that you're not. There might be some here who are skeptical about marriage. It's an outdated institution, an instrument of oppression, or you haven't seen marriage modeled well or at all in your family. You might have been through separation or divorce, or you might really be struggling in your marriage right now and be feeling like you're failing. You might just think that marriage is so far away that you're not even thinking about it at all yet. And I didn't give it much thought either for a while, for a long time actually. I just always thought that at some point I'd meet someone, probably mid to late 20s, get married, have some kids, and that would be that. But clearly life has not happened that way for me. And I came to a point kind of in my mid-30s when I really had to consider how I felt about marriage. It hadn't happened for me, and I was feeling some pressure, mostly from around me, to be honest, thinking, is there something wrong with me? Why, like my friend asked, why doesn't anybody want to marry me? Am I going to be alone forever? Or if you're married, what do I do if the marriage that I've got now isn't everything that I thought it would be? And in our passage tonight, Jesus performs his very first miracle at a wedding in Cana in Galilee. And I think it gives us a framework for how we can think about marriage, for wrestling with all of those questions that we might have, that I have and that you might have. And the wonderful Annie is going to come and read our passage for us. We are in John 2, verses 1 to 11. The verses will come up, but if you've got your Bibles, there'll be some on your seats. Try and follow along.
On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 80 to 120 litres. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He didn't realize where it had come from, though the servants who drew the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings the choice wine out first, then brings the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you've saved the best until now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Annie. In the passage that we've just heard, Mary, Jesus' mother, knew who Jesus was and what he was capable of more than anyone else in the world at this point. He hadn't revealed anything about his ministry yet. And she goes straight to him in the middle of basically a crisis, complete mess, and tells him exactly what is going on. She says, "They have no more wine." She speaks to God about the issue and has absolute confidence that he will do something about it. She tells the servants there, "Do exactly as he tells you." The model that I think that Mary gives us in communicating with Jesus is complete honesty and complete trust. And if you take anything away from tonight, it's Mary's model of complete honesty and complete trust. Because not only is this the model for marriage, but it's also the framework for bringing all of our questions about marriage and relationships and sex to God. Telling him exactly what is going on and entrusting the outcome to him completely. Like, what is the point of marriage? What even is it? Why can't I have sex before I'm married? And to answer some of those questions, we have to go back to the beginning, the very beginning in Genesis. So what is marriage? Marriage is a covenant, not a contract. In Genesis 2:24, we read that a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast or cleave, like be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And Jesus repeats these very words in Matthew 19. They enter into a covenant with one another. We hear the word covenant a lot in the Bible, but do we understand what it really is, what it really means? Because today we live in a contract-oriented society. You often hear, get that in writing, like make it legally binding. And Dr. Gary Chapman, who was here at HTB a few months ago, and he's written, I think, something like over 90 books. The most famous ones are the love lessons, the love languages. And he says that many Christians now have brought this contract mentality into their idea of what marriage is. So we busy ourselves making contracts, and then we try to force each other into living up to them. A contract is an agreement between two or more people specifying that one will do something if the other does something. You might have a rental contract that says your landlord will let you live in their house provided that you pay your rent each month. And if either side breaks that contract, you end the relationship. So isn't covenant like that? Yes, it's an agreement between two or more people, but the very nature of a covenant is very different to that of a contract. And here is why. Because a covenant is a divinely created relational bond. initiated entirely by God before we have agreed to do anything. Covenant love is not selfish, it's unconditional. From the first covenant God made with Noah, to Ruth and Naomi, to David and Jonathan, God reached out and offered the covenant to them. God offered to Noah that covenant to save him. He said, Noah then reciprocated by building the ark. But God didn't get anything from that relationship. It was entirely unselfish. And then finally, the covenant that Jesus made with us in dying on the cross. God's covenantal love is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And it is the complete opposite of contract love that can be withdrawn at any moment. A marriage covenant is a permanent, exclusive, public commitment to share every part of yourself and your life with another person in the same way that God has done for us. Whereas a contract is transactional, a covenant is transformational. Because firstly, it transforms the people within it. Think of it like this. Now, I'm not a scientist, so you have to bear with me. But there are two completely distinct elements of carbon and iron in our atmosphere. Now, in the steel making process, the carbon bonds with the iron to make a completely new, really strong molecular structure that is steel. And as iron and carbon, you are completely distinct from your spouse or your potential spouse. This is the mysterion, the divine mystery that St. Paul talks about in Ephesians. We do not lose our individuality when we get married. And getting married does not make us complete. It makes us different and hopefully stronger. But it's a miracle that somehow two whole, distinct people come together to make something totally new. Marriage is not completing anything. Two people come together and they don't make two, they make one. Secondly, your marriage has the power to transform the world around you. The marriage service in the Church of England says that marriage enriches society and transforms community. In Genesis, we go back to the beginning again. The first thing that God does in the garden is to put Adam and Eve to work, to partner together to steward God's creation. There was way too much in the garden for one person to do. Adam needed help, and so God said, I will make him a helper. In the Hebrew, it's azer. And this is, don't get me wrong here, don't misunderstand me, this is not like a derogatory term, like the way the woman needs to keep the house clean so the man can earn all the money, unless that's obviously what you've decided between you. It translates more, azer, translates more like one who comes alongside. The idea is that they stand shoulder to shoulder, side by side, equal. Someone that you love and you respect, who comes alongside you in a project. Everyone needs a project, a calling, a purpose in their life. For me, God was kind enough to let me spend a lot of years discovering my purpose. I studied French at university, I became an interior designer, bit of a property developer, then a teacher, and then someone invited me on Alpha, and I met Jesus. And he said, finally, I've been waiting quite a long time for you to get here. Now, get to work. One of the best things about meeting Jesus for me has been discovering my true purpose. And it's also helped me realize that yes, I would love a partner with whom I can help to create God's kingdom here on earth. But I only want somebody who wants to do that with me. If we're not in it together, then I can actually do so much more, me and God. I'd encourage you, find your purpose. or at least be committed to finding it, whether you're married or whether you're not. Because if the point of your life is your relationship, and the point of your relationship or your marriage is your relationship, then it will be trying to serve a purpose for which it's not designed. If you're married, do you know that part of the point of your marriage is not just to love each other? Of course, that is the point of marriage, but it's also to transform the world around you, to support each other in playing your part in building God's kingdom on earth. So if we understand marriage as a transformational covenant and not a transactional contract, then that will also transform our understanding of sex. Now, picture two young, naked people in a garden. It sounds a little bit like Love Island, I know. But, no, we're not going to go there. But yes, we are going to go there. God talked about it. Salt and Pepper talked about it. They sang about it, and we're going to hear about it in a minute. So we're going to talk about it. I think we did have something, but maybe not. Oh, yeah.
Spinderella cut it up one time.
Yeah, come on. Is anybody old enough to know it? Yeah, great. Except let's see if we can have the words. Oh, well.
Come on.
Let's talk about sex, baby.
There we go.
Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and bad things that make me. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex.
Exactly. Now, we don't talk about it a lot in church, okay? Just what happened there is horrifically awkward. But historically, also, the church has a reputation for making God basically the great spoil sport of sex, rather than the inventor of it, which is what he is. St. Jerome was so afraid of temptation that the church ended up decreeing that even in marriage, for a while, you were only allowed to have sex on 44 days out of the 365 days in the year. There was even a guy called Daniel the Trouserer. They gave him a title. He was employed solely and justly to paint clothes onto all the paintings that were deemed like too raunchy, like cover up all the bits. Interestingly, now the world seems to have gone the other way, with what is seen as sex positivity. There's no moral or ethical distinctions in what a person can and can't do, and we're all entitled to do what we want with our bodies. People say it's just a natural appetite, a desire that we're all encouraged and entitled to satisfy. And that is said to be true freedom. But is that really the case? I know it wasn't. For me, it left me feeling empty, lonely, and disconnected. Somehow, society has bought into the lie that physical intimacy is a good substitute for the true spiritual and emotional intimacy that we are all searching for and that can only truly be found in a relationship with God. But the incredible thing is that God created sex. No, not only did he create it, but he also created marriage as the context for you to express your desire with joy and delight and love and humility and safety and trust and intimacy. God didn't look down on Adam and Eve one day and be like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? You don't have to get married to have sex to have a happy life. Far from it. For example, even though it may seem like it, people, your desire for sex is not the same as your need for food or water. You don't need it to stay alive. So husbands, wives, don't be trying to pull that one when you go home tonight. But God did create it for us to enjoy within marriage. And if it's so great and God wants us to do it, why only in marriage? This is where the covenant comes in. The covenant of marriage creates the protection, the safety, the environment for fulfillment, for joy, for flourishing. Because that relationship, that covenantal relationship, is unconditional, it's unselfish, and it's lifelong. It means that you're committed to making it work because of the promises that you've made to one another. Being really physically intimate with someone outside of marriage, even if you're completely convinced that you're going to end up marrying them in the long term, does not produce the bonding and the connection that we think it will. It produces comparison, insecurity, loneliness, shame, disconnection, because it's outside of the safety that you get within the promises that you've made in marriage vows. And so we began tonight talking about how Mary brought the reality of all of her situation to Jesus in complete honesty and complete trust. And we haven't been able to cover everything, but I hope that at least we've been able to have an honest conversation about marriage. And I'd love to end by telling you about my friend Louise. She's someone in my life who I have seen over and over again come to Jesus in all of the situations, in all of the messes in her life, with complete honesty and complete trust in who Jesus is. Louise is a beautiful, smart, funny, consultant pediatric anaesthetist, and she has always wanted to be married and have a family. And she, like many people, thought that it would happen pretty naturally. But as the years went by after school and university, and she didn't meet anyone, and it became really hard for her at times because this was something that she really desired in her heart. But the thing is, Louise didn't let that desire rule her life because she hadn't placed her identity completely in getting married. Her identity was in who she was in Jesus. So she focused on who she knew God had called her to be, an amazing doctor, helping very sick children get better, bringing joy and life to dark places, and actually to raising a family by fostering teenage girls. Not being married was a source of pain in her life, but she frequently and consistently brought it to Jesus. We prayed together about it. We even have a group that she started called Hope for Husbands. And it's still going strong. And then, completely out of the blue last year, she met Charlie. And Charlie had been, tragically, had been widowed a couple of years before, and he has 2 incredible children. Louise and Charlie have been through a lot on their dating journey in the past year, working through grief, bringing a family together. But they committed themselves to bringing it all to Jesus and to giving themselves totally to one another, to partnering together to build God's kingdom and to raising a family. And last month, I got to marry them and to preach at their wedding, witnessing their vows, it's going to make me emotional, to one another, and watching Louise's foster daughter singing their first dance song. The whole family, all 4 of them, cutting the cake together. It was one of the most beautiful moments in my life. And I wasn't even the one getting married. To me, this was the wine that came from the water. This was the joy that God brings when we trust him, and he does something incredible. Jesus' first miracle is to bring true joy, true celebration, true life. He's saying, this is what heaven is going to be like, and I've come to inaugurate this new heaven and new earth. That's why I've chosen it as my first sign. Jesus Christ comes to bring deep heart fulfillment. He comes to bring joy, and he uses a wedding as an analogy for that. The marriage relationship done God's way is meant to be a visible, tangible image of God's relationship with us. It's so significant that God chose it as a picture, a metaphor of his relationship with his people. The permanent, unconditional, steadfast, loving covenant of human marriage is the earthly image of God's divine plan for his love for us. Whether you are married, whether you've had a great example of marriage or not, whether you're married and it's going great, you're finding it really hard, whether you're not married yet or anymore, God wants us to tell him that the wine has run out when it has. He wants us to tell him how we're feeling, what's going on in our hearts, so that he can turn that water into wine, so that he can bring new life wherever we need it. And so there might be some of you here tonight who have those questions, who have pain around relationships, around marriage, and you want and you need him to turn that water, those empty jars, into wine. So shall we respond